recording right now. So let's move forward. All right, everyone. So again, my name is Natalie Eicher. I am the undergraduate advisor for the Department of Political Science, and this is the information session for our new major that's starting this fall in our department, which we're really excited about, and it is very timely, but it's the Political Science, Race, Ethnicity, and Politics major, and it's a Bachelor of Arts. And this is the quick overview of today. So we're going to go through some introductions. We're going to talk about why we brought upon this new major in our department, what the major looks like in terms of structure and some academic advising, and then some topics of interest within race, ethnicity, and politics. So that's going to be a focus on the faculty who are teaching the classes that are associated with this major in the area of concentration and what they do, what they've studied, and where their students have gone on to do, and anything else that they would like to talk about. And then at the end, we're just going to have a Q&A. So I've shared with our faculty in attendance some of the questions that you all had, and so hopefully they can address those and anything else that you all wanted to discuss. So we're gonna have the introductions, and then I'm going to have Thad introduce himself.
Great, thanks so much, Natalie, for, for putting this together. Excuse me. And thanks so much to all of you, whether you are a returning student who wants to learn more about this major or new to UCSD, welcome. It's a different kind of fall to be joining us, but we're glad that you are engaged. We hope that you stay engaged, and we're so excited about this opportunity to share with you this new major today. So thanks for joining us. And now I'll turn it over to, I think we can just, everyone can hop in the order that they are in this slide. Professor Abrahana, are you there? All right, maybe Professor Gause.
Hi, everyone. I'm Professor Gause. I guess we'll go through a bit later about some of the courses I teach and how it relates to the new major, but I'm also excited to be here and answer any questions that you might have.
Hi, everybody. I'm Professor Adida. I'm very excited to be here, very excited for the launch of this new major. And yeah, I'll save the details for a little bit later.
Hey, everyone. I'm Prof. Wong. Looking forward to chatting with you all and answering whatever questions that you have. And like my colleagues, really excited to launch this new endeavor. Thanks.
Hello, everyone. I'm Prof. Wheely, and I'm also very excited to be here today helping launch this new major, and looking forward to your questions that you have.
And again, my name is Natalie Eicher. I'm the undergraduate student affairs advisor for the department. On this call as well are my colleagues, Joanna Peralta, who also helps me with undergrad advising, and she is our department OSD liaison. So she will be helping me with advising for this major, as she has done all of our other majors in the past year or so. And then we also have my supervisor, Ariane Parks. She's our student affairs manager for the department, and has been a great source of help as far as advising goes. And with that, we'll just move forward.
So this is Professor Feely again. I can talk a little bit about this question of why a race, ethnicity, and politics major, and some of my colleagues can join as well. One of you asked through the Google survey, was this an initiative of students and faculty? And the short answer is both, that we've noticed growing undergraduate demand for these courses, and our faculty, it's actually been about 2 years that we've been working on developing this major, which requires developing the courses, hiring new faculty in this area, but there's solid departmental commitment to this. And of course, it's driven in part by just recognizing the increasing relevance of understanding race and ethnicity as categories of analysis for domestic and international politics. We obviously can't understand very fundamental questions relating to citizenship, inequality, violence, immigration, nationalism, and other areas of political science without understanding the role of ethnicity and race. And we can't understand racial and ethnic hierarchies without understanding the role of politics in creating and sustaining these hierarchies. So with this foundation, the race, ethnicity, and politics major is designed to provide you all with the knowledge and skills to critically engage, to research, to write, and speak about the role of ethnicity, race, and power in the United States and also cross-nationally. And what you'll see as some of my colleagues talk through the trajectories of some of their former students in this area, that there's a growing number of internship, employment, and other postgraduate opportunities for students trained in this area. The other thing to note is that if you major in this, this subfield of political science, it's transcripted on your diploma as political science, race, ethnicity, and politics.
And if I could just hop in here a little bit, Professor Feely, just to add to that, one of the things that's important to note is that this has always been core to what UCSD political science studies. We've always had a great group, one of, I think, the nation's best groups of researchers looking at racial and ethnic politics and teaching about it. But we've always made sure that that's integrated with the rest of our curriculum. So all of the other majors within political science and almost all of our classes, whether they're in American politics, international relations, comparative politics, even research methods, we're dealing with these fundamental questions. I teach a course in California politics, and I hope as we get through this, the other professors can give you a sense of the courses they teach, the research they do, so you can get a sense of how to connect with us. You can't study California politics without studying throughout its history the diversity of California and how people have come together to create this state and how our institutions have handled that. And we'll continue to have this integrated with each of our courses and all of our majors. But there's been so much student attention to this that we felt like we wanted to give people the chance to dive really deeply and focus on this really important aspect. So we're accentuating something that has always been an emphasis for a lot of our research and allowing you to do that deep dive that so many of you are interested in today.
Awesome, thank you all. So moving forward as far as the major structure and academic advising, as you all are familiar with our majors, it pretty much looks identical to the structure of any of our majors with an area of concentration. So what that means is you have your 4 lower division courses. In this major, we do require that students complete Poly 10 or Poly 10D, and then you would choose from 2 additional lower division courses. And then, of course, as with all of our political science majors, we require Poly 30 or 30D. And then for the upper division requirements for the area of concentration, those 5 courses focus on completing courses within certain subcategories. So we ask for at least 3 courses from subcategory A, and you'll see that list on the screen right there, a minimum of 1 from subcategory B, which you see as well. And then that 5th course for the area of concentration can come from either subcategory that interests you. And then of course you have your 7 additional political science elective courses. And as I've said before in many, many advising meetings, these courses can also be ones that are in the area of concentration. So, again, you can take more race, ethnicity, and politics type classes if you so wish to. They would just start falling into your elective category for the major if you've already completed the concentration. And again, all courses for the major must be taken for a letter grade, and a C- or better must be earned. If you have any questions about what that looks like for you to transition to the new major, just send us a message on the Virtual Advising Center so that myself or Joanna can help you work through that. So what we've done before is usually compare what you've currently completed for your major, what you're currently enrolled in for the upcoming quarter, and see how that is allocated in the new major in a major checklist, which I'll show in a future screen afterwards, so that you can see where your courses are allocated and make the best decision for you. And if you all don't already know, we do put up our tentative course offerings for the academic year on our department website. So that's in the tab of undergraduate program within the sub-tab of political science courses. And then it should be linked right there at the top of that page. Right now, we have winter 2021 courses and then spring 2021 courses that we hope to offer up there since fall is already known. And I believe it was last updated sometime last week, so it's pretty current. So definitely take a look at it if you haven't already. I did see a few questions from folks who were juniors or seniors, and so y'all were asking, do I have enough time to complete this major? So, depending on the classes you've taken and plan to take, that answer could be a yes, it could be a no, but definitely reach out to us so that we can help determine what that looks like for you, especially with the other courses that you may need to complete for your college or university requirements. So again, just ask. So this is just a screenshot of what the major page looks like on our department website. It's already up there, so you can look at it at any point in time. And as you'll see at the bottom, we do have that major checklist. And this is what it looks like when you download that PDF. So, in the future, we will probably be adding classes to our curriculum. That is something that hasn't stopped since at least I've started. And I know my supervisor, Ariane, can say the same. So we're constantly adding to our curriculum. And if there are any course additions to this major, it will be updated on our department website and on this major checklist first and foremost. And then unfortunately on your all's degree audit, that's when it'll be updated last. But if there's any discrepancy that you see, again, just reach out to us and then we can make those changes as needed, and we're happy to do so. Just let us know. And I'm just gonna now let our faculty speak about their expertise and experiences.
So I'm not sure if Professor Abahano is here yet. She may not be. So I'll just say a few words. She's in another meeting and hope to be here, but this year she's serving as acting provost of Warren College. And so she's been a leader nationally and internationally in the field. She really has led this initiative in our department as well, together with others. But these are two courses that she teaches that are a core part of the major: race, ethnicity in American politics, Asian American politics in the US. The next slide talks a little bit about some of her research in the area. A recent book, White Backlash, Immigration, Race, and American Politics, which won our National Professional Association's award for Best Book on Race and Politics. Another book on campaigning in the new American electorate, television advertising to Latinos. Another book, New Faces, New Voices, the Hispanic Electorate in America, and numerous other articles focused on race, ethnicity, and politics in other leading political science journals. She's also a leader in our professional organization, the American Political Science Association, in developing this subfield of political science.
Okay, hi everybody. So I'm Professor Claire Adida. So the work that I do is really focused on immigration and understanding why immigrants integrate in some places and face exclusion and do not integrate in other places. And what's a little different is that I do this from the comparative perspective, which means that I started off studying these questions about immigration in Africa, so looking at African immigrants in Africa. And then I then moved around and started looking at the question of Muslim immigrant integration in Europe, and specifically in France. And now I'm doing a lot more work based in the US to try to understand the challenges that that new migrants face, and specifically African migrants face in the US, and how this interacts with racism in the country. So it's hard for me to summarize what I research, but any question related to immigration and how vulnerable groups try to navigate hostile environments, that's really interesting to me. So the class that I teach that is relevant for this major and for you guys is Poly 108. So it is one of the classes listed under sequence A. It's Politics of Multiculturalism. It also fulfills the university-wide EDI requirement. So it's a big class. It's being taught this fall remotely. It's a class that tries to talk about issues both domestically in terms of how the U.S. Deals with diversity and its legacies of racism and discrimination, but also internationally, we talk about immigration in other contexts. And the overarching theme is, what do liberal democracies do to accommodate diversity? And so we have kind of these theoretical debates about group rights versus individual rights, but we also look at policies in action. So we're going to talk about affirmative action. This is on the ballot this November, so in California. So we're going to be doing a lot of research on affirmative action. We're going to talk about reparations for slavery. We're going to talk about whether protests, how effective they are for shaping legislation, for example. We're going to talk internationally, we're going to talk about various policies that countries take vis-a-vis their immigrants, and we'll spend a little bit of time talking about policies vis-a-vis Muslim immigrants, and specifically the headscarf ban in France and elsewhere. So those are the kinds of things we're going to talk about. Next slide. I just wanted to give you a sense of what my research is. One of the papers that I've been working on has looked at ways in which you can get people to be more inclusive, to have more open attitudes towards vulnerable groups. And so what we did in the US with my co-authors is we did a number of surveys where we asked people to think about their own family history of migration, right? So this is one of the things about the US is a lot of Americans are here as a result of migration. It could, either by choice or by force, of course, but they are here as a result of migration. And so what happens when you ask people to think about, okay, so who's the first person in your family to have migrated to the US? And like, remember this, remember that you were once also a migrant. What happens when we ask people to think about that? And what we find, if we've done this, if we ask people to think about this, they then express more positive attitudes towards immigrants. So when people are reminded that they are also a product of immigration, they then have more positive attitudes towards migrants. This is just to give you a taste of what I do. Some of my former students are superstars. A lot of them go on to get higher education, so business school or law school. A lot of students go on to law school. I also have a lot of former undergrad advisees who go on to the Peace Corps. And I think this is one of these things that this particular major will be really good at preparing you for, is these kinds of jobs that require a kind of sensitivity of diversity and of where we stand, where the country stands in the world. So you can see where these superstars are today. So I hope to see many of you in this major. I hope to see many of you in my class this fall. That's about it. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Good to talk to you again. My name is Professor Gause. First, wanted to share a class that I teach that relates to this major. It's officially called Participation and Inequality, Poly 100I. In the course, we talk about how there are inequalities in both the political participation and the representation of different groups in the United States. This course also fills the university-wide EDI requirement, which means in this case, it also has a large focus on African Americans, but in general pays a lot of attention to inequalities based on race, gender, ethnicity, and class. And the purpose here, again, we start by talking about just kind of how the US was created and how kind of normatively we might think of political participation, what that means for how groups should be represented in society. And then we talk about how institutions and individuals have made it more difficult for some groups to participate in others. And a big emphasis on the course and in my courses in general is really to get you engaged on how we can think about these political phenomena, things we research in your daily lives. So we talk a lot about how like you participate individually, how conversations you have, where you get your information and how that influences the way that you think about politics. One of my biggest things is just trying to challenge everyone's preconceptions about how they think about politics, because a lot of times we're in these echo chambers where we just hear from people we know. And even if we're in a classroom full of people who think the same way we do, doesn't mean that those opinions are based in facts. So a lot of what I do is trying to challenge people on the way they think about politics. I have had students who've come back to me and said that like a lot of what they learn in my courses are really helpful when they participate on campaigns or work in or have conversations with their families or even in organizations on campus, how this has influenced the way they think about their careers in law or politics or even things that are very unrelated to political science. So I encourage you, if you're interested in being challenged and in being in understanding these types of inequalities, to take this course. It also is very relevant to my own research interests. On the next slide. I generally study inequality in lots of different ways with a heavy focus on race and ethnicity, but also on income and economic inequalities. Two recent publications that I had come out this year. One focuses on the influence of protests on the way that legislators support or represent their constituents. And a lot of this, I argue, is motivated by understanding how difficult it is for certain people to voice their opinions and concerns in politics. And protest is a way that groups who may not be encouraged to participate through elections or can't participate through lobbying behavior, they resort to protest instead, and still face a lot of costs when engaging in protests. And because of the difficulty it is to protest, when people see that behavior, they understand it as something that is real and that people are really passionate and interested in, and actually a way that groups are able to gain representation. In another paper, I look at how when people run for office, the different challenges they face, explicitly looking at the challenges faced by Barack Obama when he first ran for president, and even in his second election, and how he was very strategic in highlighting kind of his white family and his white ancestry in order to appeal to more broadly to groups and to get out of the pigeonholing that a lot of minority get into, whether it's based on gender or race or ethnicity or whatever that might be, how he used this strategy of kind of appealing to other identities to demonstrate to people that he also desires to represent lots of different types of people. So thank you for allowing me to share some of the things that I do relevant to this major, and I look forward again to any questions that you might have later.
Hey again, everyone. So apologies in advance. I think I missed an email and did not send over as much information as I should have for the purpose of these slides. But as I'm sure you all have learned, your profs are more than happy to freestyle and talk about themselves whenever they have an opportunity to. But no, so I study the politics of immigration. And when I think about the politics of immigration, I'm thinking about legislative behavior, so why elected officials do what they do when it comes to immigration policy. So whether it be a roll call vote to make policies more inclusive, or other votes to make policies more restrictive, the questions that I'm interested in are why. So the determinants of why legislators do what they do. When it comes to immigration policy in the United States, it's been a really busy last few years. I don't think a day goes by without something in the news about either a change in immigration policy or looming changes in immigration policy. And so when we think about the academic study of the politics of immigration, we know what the stakes are beyond just the academic study of. Because when we think about these policy changes, we can think about ourselves, we can think about our families, we can think about our friends who may be directly affected. And that leads to a very different set of research questions that may be of interest to the academy, but also research questions that may be of interest to sort of policymakers more generally. And because there are distinctions between the questions that are valued in academia versus in policy circles, I created the U.S. Immigration Policy Center on campus. And so we are about a year and a half old now. I'll just say that in terms of my Poly 158 class, the Politics of Immigration, which is a part of this major, I recruit research assistants basically from my classes. The class tends to be big. It similarly fulfills a DEI requirement, about 300 students a pop. And the students who do well, as well as the students who don't do so well, I always want to sort of create opportunities, if I can, for more undergraduates to get not just research experience, but to work on projects that hopefully they can see sort of translate to impact in the world. Right now, and thank you to the department. Some in the department who aren't on the Zoom right now have helped me hire over 40 undergraduate research assistants this summer. I pay everybody. I'm not going to be that professor who exploits free labor. So everybody is paid. There are over 40 research assistants right now. We've made 1.3 into states like Florida and Arizona, and Georgia, and North Carolina since November 2019, and we'll make a similar number of calls in the last 6 weeks before the election. The reason why we're doing this is because the politics of immigration have many, many tentacles, and one is about to vote based on the sort of policy context. So one may expect that if one is a naturalized citizen, they will be more likely to vote given the last 3 years of immigration policy under the Trump administration. But political scientists thought Latinx voters were going to be more likely to vote because then candidate Trump, and his kind of railings, about Mexicans in particular, and that didn't really come to fruition. So over the past year, there have been several voter mobilization experiments that, the seeds were planted in November 2019, and we will have hopefully a lot of different projects that undergraduate research assistants can put their names on, so that you can not just kind of be a part of an academic research center, but also hopefully have your name on something that is out in the world that will hopefully help in terms of whether it be grad school, law school, or whatever your next step is. So the center that I run, one of the tentacles being voter engagement, specifically among naturalized citizen voters, there are tentacles there as well. So when we think about voter engagement, the sort of ways that immigration may or may not be affecting voter turnout, enthusiasm, et cetera, this cycle. We also get to sort of ask questions about how campaigns work. And when it comes to how campaigns work, you start kind of peeling the layers off the onion and realize that there are these very, very deep intersections between immigration and racial and ethnic politics in the United States. For example, when it comes to a campaign that wants to target, for example, Muslim, Arab, or South Asian voters, if there is no sort of work on the front end to try to estimate voters who may be Muslim, Arab, or South Asian. And there are data vendors across the country. And if you're thinking about work, you make a lot of coin if you are in the campaign space, working with a data vendor or an analytics firm. So the billions of dollars that are spent during elections, and how in that ecosystem data is highly valued. Well, when we think about estimating certain populations for the purpose of targeting them, then we're thinking about how a campaign, for example, how Kamala Harris can sort of leverage her South Asian roots to identify South Asian voters to interact with. Well, a lot of the tools that are used to estimate, race and ethnicity are born from census data and surname lists from the Census and the Social Security Administration. But if you, again, peel the sort of layers a little bit off that onion, there are some states with self-reported race or ethnicity. And in North Carolina, for example, we found through the creation of a new name algorithm that a lot of South Asian names, Asian Indians in particular, were self-reporting as American Indian or Alaskan Native. And so we actually reached out to some of those voters with a partner in North Carolina because, one, it's about voter engagement, nonpartisan, it's important to vote. But in that context, we get an opportunity to ask questions like, well, what is their ancestry beyond just, a 5-box race or ethnicity question. And we are confirming that a lot of folks trace their ancestry back to India and are, we think, selecting American Indian because they see Indian as, part of that checkbox. And then when it comes to Muslim and Arab voters, there's no category to say that you're Muslim, but we can think about how names and name combinations, think about the billions of records that are scraped from for the purposes of creating genealogy portals. So your death records, your birth records, your census records from across the world, and then assigning probabilities to name and name combinations that pinpoint specific countries of origin. Then we can get ourselves a better estimate of who is a potential MENA voter, so Middle Eastern North Africa, or a potential MASA voter, Muslim, Arab, or South Asian, so that if we are talking about Islamophobia in the US, if we're talking about things like the travel ban or the Muslim ban, then you can imagine how organizations want to be able to try to get a better shot at identifying a vote who is like 40 plus research assistants are helping with this cycle. In terms of the sort of what is next. So I spend a lot of time with all of my undergraduate research students trying to think about the next steps. So there are a lot of students who just come kind of in and out, and that's fine. Some students are in it for the long haul. And so for those students who are in it for a long haul, we'll create a 1-year plan, a 2-year plan, a gap year plan to think about the projects that I'm working on, the projects that they can potentially work on, and how we can build a file, a strong file to get them to their next step. And so just a couple of former students that come to mind, a couple chose between UCSD and other top ranked programs. One is, started at Harvard this year, another started at Berkeley. Pew Research Center, former research assistant is at the ACLU, going into detention centers and surveying detainees specifically about health needs. Also policy analysts up the wazoo in local government and state government and federal government in legislative offices, as well as in think tanks nationally and locally. So when it comes to what one can potentially get from this new major, I think it is a lot, not just in terms of top level cutting edge academic scholarship, but I think we as a department have our sort of finger on the pulse of the real world in ways that some other departments do not. And so, translating your participation in the major to jobs in the real world where you can apply what you've learned, I think that is something that we all are going to sort of think about and care deeply about as well. So with that, thank you.
So Professor Nellis isn't here today, but he, as you saw, Natalie showed the structure of the major, and essentially there's, for the upper division course, or the upper division part of the major, you'll take 3 courses in American politics and 2 in either comparative politics or IR. And then the 5th course, you can choose between the 2. So Professor Nellis teaches in the area of comparative politics. Specifically, he focuses on Southeast Asia. These are some of the questions that he asks in his course, Democracy, Development, and Conflict in Southeast Asia. How caste and tribe shape voting behavior, how ethnic outbidding gave rise to Sri Lanka's decades-long war, how India's Hindu Nationalist Party came to win national power, can mandated political quotas improve the welfare of ethnic minorities. Some of his research on the next slide, well, one of his central research questions anyway focuses on how elections can serve as instruments of both inclusion and exclusion, specifically in developing democracies. I think all of us can brag about our former students. These are some of Professor Nellis's, one who's been a scholar selected by the Hispanics Scholarship Fund, now applying to law school, another JPEL payments, government research program, another a researcher at Columbia applying for PhD programs in political science this year, another from his previous institution, Yale, who's now a Rhodes Scholar at Oxford. I'm only going to say a few things because we want to get to the Q&A, but as Professor Gause said, really the vast majority of us, probably all of us in the department, look at these questions of race and ethnicity. I teach 3 upper division courses. All of these courses use an intersectional lens, looking at the way gendered, ethnic, national, and class identities and situations combine to help us look at sources, specifically institutional sources of inequality at global, national, and local levels. Thinking about some of my former students, next slide. And this was very exciting just to reflect upon looking what students are doing this coming year and last year in many different areas. So like my colleagues, pursuing research programs in both ethnicity and race and minority rights. Many of our graduates go to law school. Others work with community-based governmental, non-governmental programs, focusing on policy analysis and other areas. So our goal with the major, though, is to provide you, and so my courses are not yet part of the major, but like many of my colleagues, we're thinking about this year. I'm on sabbatical this year. Hopefully my courses will be included by next year, and you'll see as we grow the major, more courses coming online. But the goal is to provide you with the knowledge foundations, with the analytical skills, the theoretical skills, the methodological skills to really tackle these problems in our country and in other countries abroad, and to also build a database of sorts to help you apply for fellowships in this area, to identify internships, to identify employment opportunities, as well as other postgraduate opportunities. So with that, why don't we go to the Q&A and hear about some of the questions that you might have about the major.
Yeah, so thank you all for sharing a bit about your research and your classes that are going to be part of this new major. So I looked at all of the questions that students you all had submitted to us, and hopefully I covered the ones for academic advising. But again, if I didn't, then please send us a message through the Virtual Advising Center and we'll definitely get to it. But as far as the ones that are more pertinent to our faculty, they did address a lot of the ones that you all submitted, but one I see here that I think is important to discuss is a student who wrote in, how is this major different from just majoring in general political science and then minoring in ethnic studies? So maybe if some of our faculty want to jump in on that and provide their perspective.
I can say a few things, and some of my colleagues can join in as well. I think one of the things that you'll get in our department is this connection between civil society actors and formal politics, right? Political science is a major where we introduce you to political institutions, political processes, and this intersection between civil society actors, social movements, interest groups, and such, and formal political institutions and outcomes. So I think that you can get a very rich foundation through ethnic studies, sociology, anthropology, some of our cognate disciplines to understand the complexities of the way in which race, ethnicity, gender, class, these different identities intersect. But what you can get from our major is looking at, again, the way that these connect with formal political institutions and processes. Some of my colleagues might want to fill in more on that.
Yeah, I would add that there's also a methodological difference, I think. So
Yeah.
we're a social science. We like to think of ourselves as a science. And so we try to derive hypotheses from our arguments and to test them with data, either qualitative data or quantitative data. So you will also learn that approach to learning, right? We have a certain kind of scientific approach to accumulating knowledge, and all of the faculty here are doing that kind of work. So.
Yeah, and I would just like to jump in as an advisor. So if y'all don't already know, a lot of political science students actually double major or have a minor, sometimes two minors, a double major and a minor. You all definitely get involved in a lot of things on campus, especially related to academics. So, you know, this could be a really great opportunity to either double major, for example, political science, race, ethnicity, and politics, and then have a minor in ethnic studies, or have a double major, just so you can really get that broad knowledge about these different subjects and what research and these questions that are being asked and answered by our faculty and what is going on in the world. And just know that, you know, that can be complemented by having a volunteer opportunity with a resource center on campus, in this case, virtual for the time being, but still an opportunity nonetheless, or involving yourself in research or having some kind of job in which you are able to get that type of experience outside of the classroom to really build up your knowledge and skills in this area. So there is a lot of flexibility, but it is important to understand how this major is different than that type of way. So another question that students had was in reference to perhaps future courses that our faculty may be thinking about or are currently planning. So will this major have courses that incorporate the current politics happening at this moment? Is that something on the radar?
So
Well,
I think
oh, go ahead, Pat.
Well, I think as you've heard from people like, so Professor Adida was talking about how the issues that are really like on our ballots this fall is something that she's incorporating in her course. Protests have been on the mind of everyone. Well, Professor Gause's course, deals with that. I think in all of the courses, we're constantly every year updating them because we want to speak to these issues. Professor Wong's course is always evolving as well. So I think there may be new courses, especially, we continue to hire new people and bring more folks in, and faculty continue to innovate, but all of our existing courses are addressing these topical issues of the day. Even our statistics course I brought in this summer, new data on police violence and looking at what affects that. So.
Maureen, did you have anything to add?
Oh, yeah, just to underscore what Thad said, in all of our courses, our goal is to provide you with the theoretical, analytical, methodological skills that sometimes, in the course itself are developed through historical, but also contemporary case studies. But the goal is to give you these tools, absolutely, to be able to apply them to what you see going on in the world around us. And I think many of us then, within the context of our courses, will take on these discussions and ask these questions. How do these tools that we've introduced you to, how can it help explain this puzzle or this situation that we see right now happening around us?
Great, thank you. And kind of tied to the last question, but a little bit different. Would there be any courses or would current faculty in their courses speak a little bit more to how the history of cultures that currently make up America today, is that something that's going to be explored further? I think a number of you actually spoke about, the idea that we all came from somewhere and many of those places were not from the US. And so acknowledging that significance, but if that is going to be talked about a little bit in more detail in courses.
Yeah, I think this is one of the central goals of the campus and the DEI requirements. And as you can see, many of these courses offered in our department will help you meet that requirement. But that, as we know, historical legacies are very important to understanding the way in which power works, as I mentioned earlier, to create and sustain these different hierarchies that are based on socially constructed identities. So maybe some of my colleagues have comments about that, but it's a central goal of the major and of the campus also through our DEI courses, certainly. I don't know if Claire or LaGina or Tom, do you have comments from your DEI courses?
Yeah, I kind of briefly discussed how my courses begin kind of thinking historically about kind of the ways that this country was set up in terms of how people should participate. But a part of that also is the influence of public opinion, individual actors, and the sources, those types of things being excluded over time. In another course I teach called Organized Interest, I talk about different ways of thinking about participation, about who should participate. It talks a lot about interest political parties and kind of the actors that influence or participate in different avenues in politics. And a lot of that does have some historical basis, or at minimum, all of my courses talk a lot about group behavior and how individuals kind of can create groups, and those group behaviors influence other people in society. I think it was Maureen who mentioned this in response to the last question. My classes are also very heavily discussion based, where I do ask students who are willing to also talk about their own experiences and how those may inform or even challenge kind of the perspectives that kind of the research brings to bear on these questions. And a lot of times those discussions can get really interesting in ways that I think everyone in the class benefits from, because I don't claim to know everything. So I do ask that my students also provide their experiences and perspectives on the things that political science can teach us from the research.
Awesome.
Yeah, I'll just add that I definitely do not assume any kind of prior knowledge from students coming in. So we do go through a little bit of like the history of immigration policy in the United States and the history of immigration policy in Europe, like enough of that background so that we can start to talk about the current issues, right? You can't, you have to have some context, you have to have some understanding of the context, but we do cover this. The other thing that I'm really interested in my research is identity construction. So why are some groups perceived to be white? So Irish immigrants, when they first came, they were not identified as white, and now they're like, they're descendants of Irish immigrants are considered to be white. And so this process by which identity is constructed is something that I'm very interested in my own research. So you're going to definitely hear about that in my teaching.
Yeah, and I'll just add that in my Politics of Immigration course, we go through the history of US immigration policy. And as part of that discussion, it's a little less in my Politics of Immigration course. It was more prominent when I taught Politics of Multiculturalism. But as part of that discussion, we talk about the racial prerequisite laws. So as the US starts to change, individuals are trying to make claims to certain rights by saying that they are a particular race or ethnicity. So you have, for example, folks from the Middle East who are, immigrating to the US, trying to make claims to citizenship, saying that they are racially white, and courts deciding, yes, you are racially white, and similarly positioned other individuals, other courts are saying, no, you're not racially white. The same thing for Asian immigrants who immigrated prior to Chinese exclusion in the Asiatic Barred Zone. So that kind of discussion feeds into how we currently categorize individuals by race and ethnicity. So when we think about something like the category of being Latinx, there is a history of advocacy, especially during the 1970s, when you have community-based organizations advocating for a separate ethnicity category so that Latinx individuals are no longer, forced to just choose a box that they are racially white. For the first time in the country's history, in the 2000s, we had a multi-race category, and that is also a function of advocacy. So what this sort of does for me is lead to this, I think, pretty strong summation that in the United States, our racial and ethnic sort of, boxes that we check, they are subject to capture and recapture. And it's folks like us who are interested in essentially being more accurately counted so that we can be more accurately sort of, reflected in politics. It is us who, are part of the processes that lead to a more sort of defined and accurate set of racial and ethnic boxes that folks can check off. And these fights continue. So this go around, LGBTQ individuals, they got close. Folks who wanted a MENA classification, they got close as well. But in the context of talking about immigration policy, we can talk about things like this, the racial prerequisite laws. We can talk about our naturalization laws. That started off by saying, yes, if you are white, you can naturalize. And it took a civil war for our naturalization laws to change to say if you are, Black or of African descent, then you could also naturalize. To, the present day fights over census categorization and counting. So I think what I would also sort of like to say and end with is that major should, and I think the plan is to have, this feedback loop between students and faculty, because to the extent that there are courses that are not touching on the subjects that you all sort of care about, undoubtedly or many of us will similarly say, wow, that is something that we should emphasize more. And if we hear that, then we can, whether it be a new course, whether it be an independent study, multiple professors getting together to do an independent study, etc. I think that we can, as Thad mentioned to kick things off, there's an unusual collection, in a good way, a large number of faculty in this department who care about racial and ethnic politics in a substantive way, that I think we can band together and fill in whatever gaps need to be filled.
Thank you all. And with respect to time, I know we're inching in on 1 o'clock, but as far as the students who are in our virtual audience, if you do have any questions that we didn't address that maybe we can right now, definitely pop them in the chat and we'll take a look. So the first one is if we mind sharing our email and contact information. So thank you, Christina. I will keep that in mind. And what I will do is I can send an email to everyone who came today with the faculty's email information. And is there anything else? All right, well, if there are any questions, then definitely reach out to the specific faculty members with the questions that you have. Again, I will send it to you all after we conclude. I did just want to include 2 questions that came through. One person asked if Poly 10D is required. Yes, and if it relates to the AP government exam, just check in with me. The answer is yes, though, as long as you earn a score of 5, but I can verify that with you specifically. And as far as, connecting with me on the VAC, don't worry, just use any subject. It can be academic advising, just send it to Poli Sci. But if you missed any part of the Zoom meeting or have any other questions, just let me know. I'm happy to answer them. We do try and get to VAC messages as quickly as possible because we know that it's important for you all to get this information as quickly as possible too. And with that, I would like to conclude our information session. Thank you all, for you all to come. Our faculty, I really do appreciate it. And my hope is that the students do as well. So in order to stop further Zoom fatigue for the rest of the day, I will stop sharing my screen and then stop the recording. But again, we hope to see so many of you all in this new major and enjoy the rest of the next couple of weeks before fall quarter. Thank you all and have a good day.